Hi everyone, welcome back to another declutter video. I am going to be tackling my eyeshadow palettes today. I don't know yet if this is going to trickle into like single eyeshadows and eyeliners and all that kind of stuff, like any like eye product sort of things. But I do know I want to tackle my eyeshadow palettes. This drawer right here has all of my eyeshadow palettes and it goes pretty deep. So it's like, you know, pretty in there. There are some I'm thinking I need to definitely be getting rid of. And then I have this whole drawer right here that is full of like other eyeshadow palettes that didn't really fit and single eyeshadow type things. And then let me move my planner out of the way. By the way, my plum paper planner, literally so cute, came in the mail this week. And then I have this section right here with some additional eyeshadow palettes. So these are all my eyeshadow palettes and my dog Wilma. I think I am going to divide up my eyeshadow palettes sort of by brand and maybe by a color scheme if I only have like one palette from like one brand. So yeah, I'm gonna try and like divide up the palettes as much as I can because dividing up my product so far has been very helpful. But since they are all eyeshadow palettes, I am going to have to get a little bit creative, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I started dividing up my palettes by brand, but then I stopped really having like a large amount of palettes from a certain brand after I finished up with Morphe. So I have a lot of palettes from Anastasia, Urban Decay, Morphe. I have like 3 palettes from Zoeva, which is kind of random. But then other than that, I just have a bunch of random palettes from random brands. So I am going to start with the Anastasia palettes that I am going to get rid of. I figured you guys would want a closer angle, so I moved you up. So the first palette I have is the Anastasia Self-Made palette. I haven't opened this palette up in so long. This was a gift from my sister and it was so exciting opening up an Anastasia palette all those years ago. But truthfully, I have not opened up this palette in ages and I knew I would feel sort of reminiscent about a lot of these palettes and just kind of like emotionally attached to a lot of them. But I think I need to stop doing that with makeup. So I am going to go ahead and declutter the Anastasia Self-Made palette. But the next palette I have is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette, a classic. I am going to go ahead and keep this one. This one is still available for purchase and it's just a classic, so I'm going to keep it. The Anastasia Jackie Aina palette, absolutely stunning palette. I really want to get more use out of this and I plan on decluttering a lot of palettes today, so hopefully this can be a palette that I get more use out of in the future. Anastasia Soft Glam, another classic and something that you guys can still purchase, so I'm going to keep that one. The Anastasia Prism palette, cool palette to be honest. Something that you can't purchase anymore, I don't think. Maybe you can get it on the Anastasia website. I don't know. I'm going to declutter it though. I just never use it. Master by Mario palette. Unfortunately, this palette is a limited edition palette, but I will not be decluttering this. It's just phenomenal. The color scheme is so up my alley and I'll keep it. And then lastly, this was my first Anastasia palette. This was the World Traveler palette and the color scheme of this honestly is so fun, like such a good color palette, but I am going to declutter it because I never ever use it. Going in with my Urban Decay shadow palettes, I'm going to be keeping the Urban Decay Ultraviolet palette for now at least. I don't use this palette too often, really at all. It is a newer palette, but it is a palette that I did want to get some use out of, so I'm going to be keeping this. Next, I have the Urban Decay Smoky palette. I'm going to part ways with this. It hasn't really been used really like at all really, but I'm going to declutter it. I don't ever use it. Urban Decay Naked Heat, keeping. This is such a me palette. I wore this palette all the time and yeah, it's just so good. I'm keeping it. I also love my Urban Decay Born to Run palette, another amazing color scheme. Shadows are good. I do have this little limited edition Urban Decay like honey palette that I'm going to get rid of. Just can't really see myself using it. I love my Urban Decay Moondust palette. It's just such a good palette full of shadow toppers, so I'm keeping that, and I'm definitely keeping my Urban Decay Stoned Vibes palette. Probably the most exciting Urban Decay launch in years, I would say. I would go as far to say. And yeah, keeping this. Tati Beauty palette. Honestly, this palette was so beautiful. I really could have seen myself using this palette so often, but my mom stepped on the mirror, and honestly after that I have not really worn it out of fear of putting glass in my eye. But also, this is not a palette that I would share on my YouTube channel for obvious reasons. And although the eyeshadow quality is phenomenal, like this is a perfect eyeshadow palette in my opinion. It's so good. But yeah, I just also like the product is damaged, so I am going to declutter it. The Sephora Pro palette honestly is such a good eyeshadow palette, like such good staple colors. I am going to keep it. So I have 3 Zoeva palettes. This palette, the Cocoa Blend, I actually got from Germany, and I'm going to keep it even though I never ever use it, but you know, I just have that emotional attachment sometimes. This one, the Zoeva Matte palette, is a really good basic matte palette, so I'm going to keep this one. And then this caramel one, I am going to declutter the caramel one because I just never use it and I don't have an emotional attachment to it, and it doesn't need to be in my collection. Next I have this MAC Flamboyant palette. I really like the color scheme of this. I really enjoy MAC shadows, so I'm going to be keeping this palette. And then I also have the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette, and truthfully, I don't love the quality of these eyeshadows, and I never ever reach for this palette, so I am going to be decluttering it. Next, I have some Morphe shadows. So this palette is the 25A palette, a really great staple, so I am going to be keeping this. I love the arrangement of matte shades and shimmery shades. Next, I have the mini James Charles palette, which I originally did have the large one, but it just took up way too much space, and I hardly ever used the large one, but this was a palette that I kind of wanted in my collection just because of the color variety. So I decided to get the mini one, which just made more sense for me, and I decluttered, or like I donated the other James Charles palette. So I am going to be keeping this one. 35i Icy Fantasy. This palette is really fun. I never ever use it, but I do think because like I don't own a lot of colored eyeshadow, I think I am going to keep this. And it does have some really cute glitter toppers, which I really love. I don't even know which palette this is from Morphe. I think it might be, what is it, like 35F or something. I am going to get rid of this. I bought it because it was probably on sale at some point, and I never ever use it, so I am going to be decluttering it. And the Morphe X Jeffree Star palette, I am going to declutter this. I just don't want to own anything Jeffree Star. I have this cute Too Faced Hot Buttered Rum palette, and even though it's like a really great little eyeshadow palette, it has some good staple shades, I never ever reach for this palette, so I am going to be getting rid of it. ColourPop Nude Mood palette, I love this little palette, so I am going to be keeping it. Tartelette Toasted palette, I think this is a really great little eyeshadow palette, so I am going to be keeping it. My Oma Beauty Black Magic palette, I love this palette, so I'm going to be keeping this one. The next palette I have is the KKW Beauty Classic eyeshadow palette. This eyeshadow palette is gorgeous, and the eyeshadow quality is so good. It really pains me to say this because it's just such a good eyeshadow palette, but I am going to be decluttering it. I just am no longer supporting KKW or Kylie Cosmetics, and I don't really use this palette too often, and this definitely is not a palette that I would be featuring on my channel, so I am going to declutter it. This Ilia Beauty eyeshadow palette I am going to be keeping. Just a nice, clean eyeshadow palette to keep. This Urban Decay Show Pony palette I will always keep. This is one palette that like I am okay having an emotional attachment to. This was my very first eyeshadow palette and my very first Urban Decay palette. It's just, I hit pan on the little purple shade. That's something that I would never do now, but like this just brings back so many memories. I loved every single shade in this palette. It was just, it's just so like happy for me to look at, and I love the artwork, and this was just so cool. This was when Urban Decay was like cool, so yeah, I'll just always keep this. This and the Urban Decay eyeliner in Zero were my shit. This is the Dose of Colors Friendcation palette, and honestly this palette was so good. The quality of these shadows is amazing. The mattes are good, the shimmers are good. I'm on the fence. Like, my thing is I probably wouldn't use this in a makeup video, but I do kind of want to keep this palette around because the colors are so nice in it. I think I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it. So this is the Aspyn Ovard palette collab with Tarte. And you guys might not know this about me, but I love Aspyn Ovard. I watch all of Aspyn's vlogs. I just love her so much. I did get this palette in support of her. And honestly, like, this is a good everyday palette, but probably if you are white, I think I am going to finally part ways with this palette. I've been holding on to it for quite some time, and I just think it's time. It's time to get rid of it. This is the Smashbox eyeshadow palette in Ablaze, and it is pretty cute. It's just a nice little travel sized eyeshadow palette that I am going to keep. The LA Girl, the Nudist eyeshadow palette I am going to keep. It is a pretty nice quality drugstore eyeshadow palette. I have 3 Lime Crime Venus palettes, and I'm going to part ways with all of these. I'm going to get rid of all 3 of them. The only one that I would be like kind of skeptical about getting rid of would probably be this one, which is the original Venus. But actually, I am going to keep this. I feel really inspired by like this peachy color. I'm going to keep it. So this is the Juvia's Place Warrior 2 palette, and I actually love this palette a lot. It is all matte, and all of the matte shades are amazing. So definitely keeping that one. This is the Thrive Cosmetics Warm Neutrals palette, and this is another really good basic eyeshadow palette that I am going to be keeping. I am going to keep all of my little Revlon Color Stay eyeshadow palettes, and I actually was thinking, I didn't realize I had quite a few drugstore eyeshadow palettes, which I have in this sort of pile right here. So I actually think I am going to declutter the LA Girl one, just because it's not as good of quality as the other ones I have. So I'm going to part ways. This is the Ara Perez eyeshadow palette in Gorgeous, and I do want to get more use out of this actually. It's pretty cute. It's a great little size, and I could see myself just using it more. I just need to remember that it's there. These 2 eyeshadow palettes were limited edition from Lorac. Honestly, the cutest little eyeshadow palettes ever. They are just so adorable, but it's just like I can't use this in a little video because people can't buy them now. I don't know. I am gonna keep these though because they are really cute and I like them. This Wet n Wild Color Icon eyeshadow palette in my Glamour Squad is a really great eyeshadow palette, and I think it's only $5. So definitely keeping this. I actually plan on filming with this kind of soon. Wander Beauty Wanderess Off Duty eyeshadow palette. I am so impressed with all of my Wander Beauty products that I've been trying out recently, and I'm definitely keeping this. This is just such a cute little eyeshadow palette. I have 2 Kylie Jenner palettes here. This one is, they don't have names on these palettes, which is odd, but this is whatever the maroon one is called. I forget. I'm going to declutter this one because I never use it. Although I am not ready to get rid of my Kylie Jenner bronze palette. It's just such a me palette. It's literally like everything that I would want in an everyday eyeshadow palette. So I'm not going to be getting rid of this one because I like personally use it in my real life. I am going to declutter this Well People palette. This color scheme is just not me at all. It's super cool toned, and yeah, I'm going to get rid of this one. Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette. I don't think that this eyeshadow palette, I don't own any of the other Too Faced palettes anymore. I used to own their chocolate bar palette, and I don't think that the chocolate gold palette was super consistent with the other Too Faced formulas. So I am going to part ways with this one because it's just not as good of quality. So if you ever wondered how long I've been subscribed to Samantha Ravindal, this eyeshadow palette should tell you how long. But this is the Battleash 4 Saucebox palette, and this palette was so cool. Like, one, it was so cool that like it was a Samantha Ravindal collab or Battleash collab, but the way that like Sam talked about this palette and how versatile it was and how you could use shades as contour shades and how she put these specific mattes in there for like mixing and to use on certain parts of your face, it was just such a dope palette. And I do keep it around because it's a Samantha Ravindal collab, and it's just like one of the few collabs that she's done, but I never ever use it. I am going to finally part ways with this. It just takes up room in my collection, and yeah, I never use it. I never ever use it, so I'm going to get rid of it. This palette is from XX Revolution, and it's called Quartz. I have used this palette a couple of times, and it is pretty cute, but I can't really see myself using it all that often, and I don't think the quality between all of the eyeshadows in this palette are super consistent, so I'm going to part ways with it. So I have held on to this Stila palette also for many years. It has lasted through many declutters. This is the Stila In the Moment eyeshadow palette, and I used to love purple eyeshadow. Like I showed you guys, I hit pan on the Urban Decay Show Pony palette, this flash color, this purple flash color. I hit pan on that. Like, I love purple so much, and when I walked in to Sephora, saw this palette from Stila, it was just like love at first sight. Like, it came with a purple eyeliner that I used all the time. I've like still kept it in this eyeshadow palette. It was like a prized possession for me. I am going to declutter this one though. I just feel like it's lasted so many declutters, and I still never ever use it. Like, it's too old for me to even use, so I am going to declutter it. My Inglot Freedom palette, I am never decluttering this. I love this palette so much. This cute little Peach Sea palette, I am going to keep around. It's actually quite cute, even though I don't use it too often, but it's a cute little palette. This Undone Beauty palette I am going to keep around. I don't really use it too often, but I also think it's a nice palette, and I do like the brand Undone Beauty, so this will be great for like any future full face of Undone Beauties that I do. This Believe Beauty eyeshadow palette I bought for my full face of Believe Beauty, like Dollar Tree makeup brand. Honestly, not a bad eyeshadow palette. Like, pretty decent quality, pretty good payoff, pretty good blendability. I am going to be decluttering this though because I never ever use it, and I can't really see myself using it in the future for any video. So yeah, decluttering that. This is just a MAC quad with like random MAC eyeshadows. I am going to have to go through these because I have a few other like MAC palettes with random MAC eyeshadows in it that I know I don't use. Like, these are years old, I don't use them. I would rather fill them up with maybe like shades that I actually use now, but that's for another time. This is the Milani Pure Passion palette, and I really like this palette. Unfortunately, you can't get it at like Ulta anymore, but I do think Milani still sells it on their website, so I am going to keep it around because this is an awesome eyeshadow palette. Like, the mattes in this palette are awesome. This shade unfortunately is not very good, which is kind of sucky because that's a really good lid shade, but it's just not that good. But the whole palette itself, like overall, is pretty good. And then lastly, I have the e.l.f. Rose Gold Sunset palette, which I am going to be keeping. This is just a really nice little eyeshadow palette. Really good quality, affordable eyeshadows, and I am going to be keeping them in my collection. So these are all the eyeshadow palettes that I am keeping, and these are all the eyeshadow palettes that I have decluttered. I think I did a pretty good job. Got rid of a little less than half of my eyeshadow collection, which is, you know, pretty good. Honestly, cannot believe that my eyeshadow drawer looks like this, and it, like, I can actually see basically all the eyeshadow palettes that are in here. It's been so stuffed for so long, so I'm really happy with the declutter today. My camera is about to die, so that is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me while I decluttered my eyeshadow palettes today. Next time, I think I'm going to be doing my cheek products. Make sure you are subscribed and you have your notifications on so you can get notified whenever I post another declutter. But yeah, that's bye for now. See ya.